if you make a salesperson hire and 2 quarters in, that person's not fulfilling the role and they're not on plan, you need to let them go immediately, because if you wait another quarter, you're going to waste an entire year paying somebody, expecting them to produce a quota, and you're going to get 20% of it.
Welcome to Adapt or Die, where leaders share real stories behind their biggest pivots and their biggest success. I am Andreas Pettersson. I'm a former tech CEO that turned executive coach, and I'm the founder of Leaders Adapt. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Bill, and let's jump straight into that. Why do most founders get stuck on that $1 million to $10 million race?
Yeah. So hi, Andreas. Thanks for having me on the podcast. We've had this conversation with quite a few people, and typically when a founder gets to 1 million, they've done it themselves. They might have 2 or 3 other people, a friend, a co-founder, whatever, but they really haven't thought about how to scale. And so the hardest thing to do to go from 1 to 10 million is to go from a single input person to actually having to go hire 3 or 4 people and manage them. So you go from being a doer to being a manager. And that's usually where most people fail, because they've either not done that, or they're just not good at it. Or what I've seen quite a few times is they hire the wrong people right out of the gate, and that just pretty much kills the growth. So in order to start growing, we've run multiple companies past 20 million. And kind of my takeaway is sales is the key. And so if you're not selling, you're not growing. And it's probably the single hardest position to recruit for. We've had countless salespeople that have worked with us, some really good, some not so good. But that to me is the number one thing. Is when you start to scale, you have to have a world-class sales organization.
I love the fact that you say that, because I meet so many founders. They are either a technical expert or they are domain experts, but they're not really interested in selling. They think that great products and great services are just supposed to sell themselves. Walk us through a little bit of how you shift the mindset of these founders to go into more founder selling, to go into more sales focus.
Sure. So probably some of the toughest discussions, I think, is asking them to kind of go away for the weekend and figure out what their core strengths are. And so you really get a feel for how comfortable they are with saying, I'm not a salesperson. So you hit the nail on the head. We're working with 3 or 4 right now that are super, super technical. And I quite frankly think they have a phenomenal product, but they don't have a sales force yet. And they say they can sell, but we're not real sure. So it's kind of interesting when you do that. But if the founder can go away and say, hey, look, I'm a technical person and I want to stay technical, I really need some help trying to find the right salespeople. To me, that's like the big green flag. Let's go. If they come back and say, well, I can sell, blah, 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 that's usually a red flag, because it's just not true. So that to me says a lot about the founder itself. Is, are you willing to be comfortable in your skin and just say, I'm really, really good at technical, but I'm not good at selling. And so to me, that's the first step. If you can get past that step, we know countless salespeople, and we've got partners all over the world that can help. And so the first step, though, is realizing I need help. And then once you can get past that, then you kind of move on and say, okay, that's great. We're going to go hire a chief revenue officer or a VP of sales, or someone that's going to take you to market. But to me, that's the first key step, is the founder themselves realizing that that's just not their core competency.
What do you typically tell them to make them realize that? And the reason why I say that, I met some stubborn founders who who are a little hard to convince sometimes. So walk me through like such a situation and such a conversation.
Sure. So we've known each other for a while. I like to kill people with facts, because everybody has an opinion, and emotions play high in that. So I just try to kill you with facts and just say, you've done a phenomenal job getting where you are. How many clients do you have? What's your revenue model? Do you really think that you're going to sell 10 times what you've sold so far? Are you going to wear that hat? You're going to have to stop being a salesperson. So I just kill them with facts and just say, if you were to go look today at all of the statistics in the market, less than 10% of the companies out there in the United States go from 1 million to 5, and less than 5% go from 5 to 10. So you have a 5% chance to go to 10 million in revenue. Do you think you're the person that can actually do that? And we basically choose whether to work with somebody positively or negatively based on the answers to those questions.
It just is, right? Sometimes you just have to have those conversations, and it just is.
Well, it should, and it's okay. Not everybody's perfect at everything. I mean, I've run quite a few companies, and people laugh that I get stuck in operations roles because I'm not an operator. I'm a sales guy and a deal guy. So the minute operations reports to me, everybody's like, "King's X, stop that." And so I kind of laughed and joked, "Yeah, you're right. Let's go hire a chief operating officer." So it's okay. I mean, it's not like everybody's perfect at everything, but you have to be kind of big enough to just understand that and just move on.
So when do you typically come in? Like, what's the revenue these companies typically have? Because you mentioned, or I said in the intro as well, it's they usually get stuck to 1 to 10 million, but 1 million versus 10 million is a massive gap, and the number of evolutions a company go through to get from 1 to 10. So where do you ideally come in and start helping these companies?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So typically, we partner with accelerators. So what you'll find in the accelerator world is everyone comes in for ideation that, they have a great idea, they get a little bit of money, they spend 12 weeks in a cohort or something like that, and then they come out kind of left to their own devices. We actually like people that have come out of the accelerators that have gotten up to about 1 million, say 100 grand a month in recurring revenue, because somebody somewhere has more than likely helped them with product market fit. They probably had some coaching on go to market, but they just don't quite understand how to implement it. And so that's what we're good at. So we like companies coming out of the accelerators that had been trained somewhat and told, you can do this. It also helps us screen. So we're not talking to 500 companies. We're talking to 50 or 100. But that's typically why we choose that revenue number. And then it's one thing to say that you can add 10x revenue. When you're at 2 million going to 20, that'll kill me and you and about five other people at the same time. If I catch somebody at 5 and tell them I'm taking them to 50, that's a whole different conversation because you're going to
Hmm.
change sales forces twice along that journey. And that's just not something we want to deal with. So we typically work with them for 36 to 48 months. And our job is to get them from 1 to about 10 to 12. And at that point, they're ready for Series A and our job's done and we just kind of move on.
What's typically the size of the company at that point, not from a revenue perspective, but from number of employees, and how does the leadership structure look like, or the C-suite? Because it's a little leading question. I meet a lot of first-time founders that tend to completely overstaff their C-suite way too early, very top-heavy. So can you elaborate a little bit? Sizes, when do the different people come on board, and all of that?
Yeah, so one of the things we do is when we take a client, we actually have them go out for 48 months and say, okay, let's imagine you're doing 12 or $13 million. Let's just put an org structure together. And so we force them to put the CFO, COO, a CRO, whatever the org structure is they think about, that's what they do. And then what we do is say, okay, let's over here on the left-hand side, let's figure out what all those people are going to make. And so you put down what they make and we total add up and you get a number and we go back and look and say all the good companies out there keep their SG&A at about 12 to 14%. And you've got a $5 million SG&A number on $10 million revenue. So this org structure will not work. So now what are we going to do? And so it's a very eye-opening thing for them because no one's ever typically taken them through that exercise. I did it last week, actually. And they're like, oh my God, we're like double what we thought. It's like, okay, well, that's great because now I've got you thinking about, do you really need 6 sales reps? Do you need 5? Do you need 4? What's their quota? So we run into a pretty interesting thing like that. And then I think what's going to happen is, your SG&A typically is 10 to 12%. Um, I think what's about to happen is with this agentic movement in AI, I know it's totally overhyped and everybody's talking about it and everything, but we've seen some really good implementations and strides on agents doing simple tasks. And so I think what you're going to see is you're going to see that headcount come down, not up. And
Massively.
yeah, there was a phenomenal article written by the guys out at NFX in the Valley. It's called Three Person Unicorn. And their thesis is that there will be some companies in the AI space that literally will get to $1 billion with 5 people or less.
Yeah.
And it's going to be using AI agents. So I think we're entering an interesting space where it's a little bit kind of on the frontier, and I'm not exactly sure how you plan for it, but all the advice we're giving our portfolio companies is if you think you can use an agent to do a job, just give it a try. Because 6 months from now, if you don't have quite a few of them at your disposal, you're going to be behind. So I think we're going through kind of an interesting shift where all of the rules of thumb that, we've known for 20 or 30 years, I think are getting ready to change monumentally, and they're going to change constant going forward. And I don't think anybody at this point is quite smart enough to understand what it is. But if you're not trying it, I think you're already behind.
I agree 1,000%. And I have already seen several of the startups where traditionally you would look at 5 people in the marketing team. It's now run by one person, maybe a fractional person, even fractional CMO, and outsourced like virtual assistants combined with a bunch of AI. And they produce the same amount like 5 people produced 5 years ago. It's scary how quickly it's going. And it's only the beginning.
Yeah, so we we're supposed to be on the forefront of that. We're reasonably good at it. I wouldn't say we're perfect at it, but we force any of the founders we work with to listen to it and go just look. And so we actually try to have them, if you're trying to do marketing, go look at these 5 agents. If you're trying to do outbound sales, go look at these 5 agents. If you're trying to do some ops in the back, go look at these 5 agents. And so it's totally up to them on what they pick. But we've been trying to give decent advice so that you're right. Instead of having a 22-person headcount at 12 million, maybe you have 12 people at 12 million. And
Exactly.
now all of a sudden you're at 6% SG&A, not 12, and your EBITDA number goes up. So your exit value just went up double.
Yeah. I got a provocative question for you. And some founders might not like this if they're listening to this, but do do the founders outgrow their companies, or do their companies outgrow them?
I would say of all the things I've seen, the companies tend to outgrow the founders. And I know they don't want to
Mhm.
hear that, but we've had some phenomenal exits where, we were the coaches and advisors. And what happened was the founder realized that they needed to surround themselves with phenomenal people, and they grew with the organization, and it worked like a champ. And they made great exits. They made a ton of money. Um, Sometimes a little bit of ego will get in the way, and it's not, you're not quite ready to bring in somebody smarter than you or that's going to run something that you can't run. And so that's kind of when you will hit a roadblock in your growth, because you just have to look in the mirror and just say, look, my job is to create this company as good and as fast as it can be. And I told people, I had this conversation yesterday. I learned about 90% of my life lessons in a football huddle. I grew up playing football, and you can have the best people in the huddle, but I got to tell you, if you're a quarterback and you get hit every once in a while, I want a better lineman in that huddle protecting me. So,
Exactly.
you got to continue to bring the best people into that huddle. And quite frankly, I hope I'm the worst player on the team, because that means we're doing great. But that's a hard thing to realize.
I'm with you 1,000% there. But Bill, do these founders, and we can have the conversation, by the way, if I don't know your viewpoint on this, we never discussed it, but the founder versus the CEO that scales the company, and sometimes they are a little different. Do you agree on that statement, by the way, or is it the same person always?
Yeah, and so we've actually taken a couple of companies up to the 100 million mark, and the founder certainly gave way and brought in a professional CEO that had run $100 million business. Because if you've never seen $100 million ops globally, there's not a chance in the world. There's just no way. And so we actually had the founder step aside. They kept most of the cap table, but they actually went. We had them go hire phenomenal CEOs that had run $100 million businesses, and all of the issues that you would have spent countless nights staying up trying to figure out, they've already seen it 5 times. And so they just jump right on, and it's no big deal. But if you're going to get beyond about 15 or 20 million, I would probably say I would go hunt for a really good CEO that ultimately can do it. And there's always exceptions. I mean, there's 6 or 7 people everybody knows, Zuckerberg and everybody else that stayed the course. but that's one in 1,000. You know,
I agree.
we're more into kind of let's help individual founders get to 12 or 15 million, and that's probably beyond that. I would say I would very much go try to find a CEO that has probably run something 5 times bigger than I'm looking at because they know how to get there.
Yeah, I agree 1,000% as well with that. So my own story, Bill, and I don't think we talked about it, but when we were, instead of saying revenue numbers now, because it was actually the number of employees for me that became where I started disconnected. Company I founded and led, when we hit about 50, 60 employees, that's where I started feeling like I'm not the best for this anymore. And we adopted EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. I went and find a COO, an integrator who ran it after that. And we realized that it was much better for me to be founder selling, be the visionary, manage the board, manage key customers, and then all the operations. It was just better to put that on someone else. But I had to unlearn my mindset. I am a fairly reasonable, intelligent person, and I had the mindset I can adapt, I can do anything. Bill, what's the one thing that a lot of founders have to unlearn in order for them to scale their company successfully?
It's a really good question. What I would say is they have to learn that everything doesn't have to be done by them. So when you got into 1 million or 1.5 million in revenue, you probably worked 7 days a week for 15, 18 months. And there's only 3 or 4 of you. So you personally think if I'm not doing it, it's just not going to get done. And you can never scale past that. So probably the most difficult decision is to realize I don't have to be in the middle of everything. I'm going to go hire people that are really good at making decisions and give them that decision-making authority. And that's the only way you're going to scale because you can't work enough hours during the week when you go from 1 to 5. We had one company that we took from 0 to 100 million in revenue in about 6.5 years.
Mhm.
Luckily we were young and we were working 60, 70 hour weeks and flying around the world. But, the CEO and the chairman just said, if you're in Europe and a decision needs to get made, do it. And so it was a partnership and we all trusted each other. And, that's how we scaled. We went from 5 or 6 people to 315 in seven years, something like that. And so if you're not trusting every single person down below, you can never do that.
How do you go about having that conversation when a CEO don't trust their organization and when they need to stop firefighting and, in my eyes, be a strategic leader instead? Like, how do you make people realize that themselves? And for the listeners, listen now because there might be clues here for things you're doing today that you shouldn't be doing. So, Bill, what do you think?
Yeah. So again, technically I kind of kill people with facts and just tell people, look, I'm a math guy. So to get from where you are to where you're headed, it requires hundreds of thousands of hours of work and you can't do hundreds of thousands of hours of work. So you can only do 2,000 or 2,500 a year. And that's if you're working every day, 10 hours a day. So you're going to have to be smart about how you delegate things. And if you can't do that, I can just guarantee you'll never get past a couple $1 million unless this AI agentic stuff, comes to play and NFX is right. And they do create a $1 billion, 3-person company, but I'm not real sure that's going to happen. So, you have to be really comfortable with who you are in your own skin and just look in the mirror and say, I'm just not good at doing this. I'm going to go find somebody. I've
Love it.
started quite a few companies where I had a CEO title. And once we got up and running, that title became more of an operations role. And like I said earlier, I'm not an ops guy. So, the money behind this came to us and said, what are you going to do? And I was like, I'll take a chairman's role. We'll go find a CEO that's a great ops person. And so we did. But you have to be comfortable enough that you're okay with that.
Okay, another little provocative question here, Bill, is hiring 50-50, or are there some process or systems you can do to that madness?
It's a really good question. I would say that we're going to kind of define sales for growth and operations for delivery. But in the sales side, we've had countless salespeople and have had very large sales organizations. And I personally have run quite a few of them. And I'm probably less than 50-50. It doesn't matter who you talk to or the resumes you look at or what's behind it. If you are hiring salespeople that are performing to plan at more than 50% accuracy, you're beating the heck out of me because
Hmm.
I've hired countless really, really high end, high paid salespeople. It's probably the single hardest thing to do. And the one thing I'll say and this isn't mean or ugly, it's just the way to grow. If you make a salesperson hire and 2 quarters in, that person's not fulfilling the role and they're not on plan, you need to let them go immediately because if you wait another quarter, you're going to waste an entire year paying somebody, expecting them to produce a quota, and you're going to get 20% of it. So just, be strong enough to know that every hire is questionable. And at the end of 6 months, we just had a kind of a review session. And if you're not doing what we say and you're not approaching plan, we terminated you. And that's why we grew as fast as we did, because it's just a burn and churn. The ops group's a little bit different because a lot of the ops in delivery has to do with technology and enablement and things like that. Those are things you can check for on resumes, and if you hire people coming from really good tech companies that have great tech stacks, you're probably a little bit better in that space because that's a hard skill, whereas selling is a little bit more of a softer skill. So it's a little bit tougher to do.
I agree. And also, a lot of people that come from a W-2 world and they hire for their first startup, or maybe it's even their second startup. I just want to add that the number one mistake they make is they hire slow, which is great, but they don't fire fast. And they take the corporate mentality, I'm going to give this person another 3 months, another 6 months. No, when you know, as a founder, get rid of them, like 2 weeks, done. You don't have the money or the time to spend to keep on the wrong people, especially on the sales team. And that's okay. It's just there is a great job for that individual. It just don't happen to be in your company.
Yeah, and you can do that with grace and allow them to walk out the door with dignity. There's no reason
Absolutely.
to belittle somebody. It's just, we hired you for a job. It's not working out. You're probably going to be really good somewhere else, but you're just not good here. So you're going to have to go and just leave it at that. And, you know, give them a reference or whatever, but yeah, let them walk out the door with dignity.
Okay, you helped generate over $500 million in M&A value. What do you, what do the most attractive companies do differently? Like, why are they becoming successful? What's the three recipe for success?
Hmm. I think probably the first one is product market fit. We've been really lucky in that we had some software at the time that was deemed really, really good product market fit, and we grew it relatively quickly. And so if you do that, you will become a target for the largest people in the space. And so all those exits were to very large companies. I won't mention who they were, but they're publicly traded and, they were worth a bunch of money. And so to buy us for 80 million, 100 million, 100 and a quarter was nothing. And so, but they like, first to market. So your product market fit has to be really good. Your go-to-market strategy has to be really, really fast. And there's been some really good books written lately. Peter Thiel and some other guys have come out and said that speed is much, much more effective than accuracy. And so get to market, get a product leadership space, and then fix the product along the way. But don't spend 6 months refining the product and not have a client. And so, in retrospect, I never really thought about that until I heard it. But in retrospect, looking back, that's exactly what we did. We went and got market share, and the guys, unfortunately, in the backroom coding, they were working as hard as we were. Since they were having to keep up. So that was actually a really good book and some really good knowledge. I would have never thought to put it that way, but once I read it and kind of thought about it, I thought it was pretty clever. So be fast, go get market share, and then fix the product along the way.
Love it. Okay, let's go into a lightning round. So in the lightning round, and I did not give you these questions ahead of time. Whatever comes to your mind, first thing out. A little short, precise, quick answers. But it's and try not to, like I said, try not to overthink this. Are you ready, Bill?
I'm good. Let's go.
Okay. Most common red flag in a growth stage founder.
Not getting to market fast enough.
Agree. Leadership trait that you look for before investing.
I would probably say humility. And I'm going to say that because I've been around a lot of phenomenal leaders, and it seems to me the ones that build teams and have humility do better than the ones that are dictatorial or, just tell everybody what to do. That's just me.
You and I can talk about that for hours, and I agree 1,000% and more. What's the biggest myth about raising capital?
It's easy and everybody wants to invest. There's somebody sent me a headline the other day and it was in big bold letters and it said raising capital is hard. And it's like, man, I'm going to print that and just stick it on the wall because it's hard.
It's really hard. I agree with you. For someone who has also raised quite a lot of money, it is tough. I agree. And it goes in cycles. And sometimes you find a company with a great idea and the money just isn't flowing at the moment.
The other thing I don't think people realize is there was a phenomenal statistic that came out of one of the VCs out of Silicon Valley last week that said, if you're in a startup pre-seed, for every $100,000 you raise, you have to pitch 60 times per 100. So think about that per bit.
A friend of mine, he pitched 135 companies before he got his first real investment.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to keep going. Plus one more and you'll get there.
You got it.
What's one question every founder should ask themselves before scaling?
We do this a lot. So is what's my walk-off number? So the one thing we find with founders, we call it life-changing target. The one thing we find with founders is they founded this company, it's going great, but they really haven't thought about if somebody comes and offers you a check, what are you going to take? Because if you knew that ahead of time, and we force people to tell us that, I can put a plan together for you to get there. But if you don't, it's like, it's the old adage. If you don't know where you're going, you're guaranteed to never get there.
I love that. There's a lot of people out there who, how do I say this? They gather a lot of great building materials. It's like building a house. They have an amazing kitchen countertop they already picked, the perfect tile for the bathroom. They just forgot to tell everyone what house they were building. Yeah. Best advice you didn't want to hear, but you personally, Bill, needed to hear it.
Probably that I'm really good at what I'm doing, so don't let failure get in your way. So one of the hardest life lessons, and that came from my wife, by the way. One of the hardest lessons I ever learned is my wife let me bet our entire net worth on my first company when we were 34, and I bankrupted us at 36. And so that was the advice I got at dinner over a $5 glass of wine. Get back out there and get in the game. Don't ever let one failure set the stage or dictate your life. You're a winner. Just go find something to win again. And it's probably the best advice I ever got came from my wife.
That's amazing. And I agree with you. My wife has said something similar, but the point is every failure comes with a learning opportunity and you're so much wiser, so go get the next and don't stop. You only truly fail if you stop. Bill, I want to thank you so much for joining the podcast. I hope the listeners realized how much gold was in this. If any of the listeners are out there and they want to work with Bill, how do they best reach you, Bill? And why should they be reaching out to you?
Sure. So if you're a founder that's trying to get from $1.5 million to say 10 or 15 million, we'd love to help. We've got 14 partners, 10 locations. We're in the UK and the US now. Just go to the website, nextstagetrajectory.com, and there's a, work with us button. Just click on it. It comes into info at, and we'll respond to it and get right on it.
And I also have to add here, Bill is not just a person who sends you an email. He will personally jump on a call, and even with a stranger. And that's something I really appreciate. And that's how I got to know you. So again, thank you so much for joining this podcast. Thank you everyone else who was listening to Adapt or Die. I think that today's conversation was extremely valuable for any founder who is out there. Listen to this multiple times. And if you like this, or you know another founder who could benefit from listening to this, please share this podcast with them, as well as please leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast. It means the world to me, to the listeners, and it helps others to discover this podcast and not make the mistakes that we have made. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And please remember, in leadership, we adapt and thrive, or we don't survive. Until next time.